everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this week's sewing class we're going to make a skirt on the diagonal, so on the bias, and that normally gives a nicer flow, a nicer wave onto the fabric for a skirt. It's a bit depending on what kind of fabric you have. When you have just a plain cotton, it will give a very big difference. I'm going to use this scuba material that I bought after I made this dress, because this is a scuba and I really like this fabric, so I immediately bought some other scuba fabrics, but this looks and feels very different than this one, so I wasn't really too glad with this fabric, but I have a lot of it, so I thought, well, I can use that for other projects. So I want to make a skirt on the bias out of it, and because this is a knit fabric, you don't really see much of a difference when you put it straight on or on the bias, but I will try to show you. Maybe you can see a difference, maybe not, but I'll just try to show you. Put the fabric single layered, then it's best to see. So when I have it just straight on, it will look like this. Go a little bit back, maybe you can see more of a difference. So when I just gather it a bit, it falls like this. And when I put it on the bias, so I'll just take the corner up and I hold it up, it falls like this. So I don't know if you can see the difference, but usually when you put it on the bias, it gets more of a flow and it doesn't make pleats, but it falls more nicely because all the lines of the fabric goes on the diagonal. And as I said already, this is knitted, so it's not like the same when you have just a straight on woven fabric, then you really see a lot of difference. For this it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to do it and see how it looks, if it makes a difference or not. It doesn't matter. It's a very easy project. It's not difficult, you just have to cut it right, so you have to know how to do that, and then it's just straightforward, so nothing difficult, but usually have a very nice result. And you see this color is almost golden, so I think it will look very nice when it's finished. So I'll show you how to do this. Now the design is very simple. It is just an A-line skirt, and what I do, because this is cut on a bias, the top part can stretch out very easily when you put it on and out several times, and also when your fabric is rather thin, this part is very unforgiving. So when you want to tuck on your shirt, or even sometimes your underwear is the contouring is showing through, I always like to make a rather long facing. I make mine 10 centimeters, but measure how long you want the end to be, that it's below your belly. If you have somewhat of a belly, make sure it is below that, because when it's on top of your belly, this seam will show. So you make a very large facing. I will also put some interfacing on top of that, so that you have nice coverage here around the belly area. And we make a zipper here on the side seam. So that is the whole pattern. Then the pattern itself. You take a piece of paper and you fold that double. So here is the fold. Make sure that you have your measurements, and I have a video, I will link it down below and here in the corner, how you can take your measurements the right way. It's very handy to have, because you need your measurements when you want to make a pattern, so you can use that over and over again when you update it, when your measurements changes. So you take your paper and you mark here on the top a quarter of your waist. So because this is doubled, when you open it up, you have half your waist, so half for the front and half for the back, because the front and the back pattern is the same. So quarter of your waist. Then measure at your hip width, that is for me here at 25 centimeters. You mark your hip width, of the quarter of your hip width. You mark that here. And then the only thing you have to do is you take a ruler and you connect those two points, and you elongate that line all the way to the length that you want your skirt to be. So this is just one straight line to the end of your skirt. I make my skirt 80 centimeters, but make whatever length you want. But make sure that your waist and especially your hip width is okay and on the right height. Because that can mean that your line can be rather on an angle, on a very wide angle. That means that your skirt will be wider. If you don't like that, you can curve downwards from your hip width, you can curve it in a little bit so that your skirt doesn't get too wide. But normally you will be okay when you just make a straight line, because I am very curvy, so you see my waist and my hip as well as some difference, and then still my skirt won't be too wide, too opened up. Then for many people the top of the skirt will fit more nicely when you drop it down here at the mid front. I don't do it because for my body type it is not better. It gives a weird shape if I do that, but you can just make a curve and drop it around 1 to 2 centimeters, 1.5 centimeters in the mid front. What you can do is just leave it on and see when you have sewn the skirt together how it fits here in the front, if you have to drop it down to have a nicer fit, or if you can better leave it on like I do. So that is your pattern. When you open it, when you cut that out and you open it up, you have your whole front and back pattern. And then you mark the top. I did 10 centimeters for my facing. You can mark that here. You can make a separate pattern out of this, or just cut from the fabric this part apart separately for the front and for the back. So that's all. Now what you do to get the true diagonal for the bias, you open up your fabric. So here was the fold. I open it up that I have just one single layer, and then you take the corner of the fabric and you fold that in so that you get a true triangle. So this side is the same as this side, so measure that out so that it is exactly right. And then you put the top of your pattern onto that line, and you can make your triangle just as big or as small as you need to have these measurements on that fold. And of course the triangle itself you don't need, but you cut it off here on the top. But then when you cut your pattern out like this, you have it on the true diagonal. So do that 2 times, one from this triangle, and then the other side of your fabric, also fold that triangle in and cut your other piece of fabric. For the facing part, the top part of the pattern, you don't cut on the bias, you cut it just straight on the grain. And because you don't want stretch on that piece of your fabric, so you can do that off the leftovers on the sides where you cut off your pattern. We have now our front and our back piece and 2 of the facings, and I already ironed some interfacing onto them to give it a little bit more structure, not really stiff, but so that it doesn't stretch that much and it holds its shape a little bit better, the top of the skirt. So now what we're going to start with is the side seams, and I'm going to put an invisible zipper into the left side seam, and because an invisible zipper you put in first before you sew the rest of the seam, I'm going to do that first and then sew down the rest of the side seam and sew the other side seam. If you don't know how to sew with an invisible zipper, I have a sewing class about it. I will link it up here in the corner and down in the description box. You can watch that first if you don't know how to do that right. So I'm going to start with the zipper. are done. Also the side seam of the facing. Now we're going to put the facing on top of the skirt, and you just do that by putting them right sides together, pinning it on top, and then hand sew these sides to the zipper band from the inside, and then you have your top nicely finished. Would recommend understitching the facing, so that means that you put your facing up, also here your seam allowance, and then you top stitch it here very close to the edge, to the stitching, and then you have secured your facing and your seam allowance when you fold it underneath and you iron that down. Then you don't have to top stitch it here from the outside, because I don't think that looks very nice, but that your facing will stay put underneath. So understitch here that whole part around the waistline.
I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. Now I'm waiting
So after you've nicely pressed it down here with the facing to the inside, you can hand sew here the sides to the zipper band on both sides, and you can also hand sew it here to the side seam, and it will stay put here too on the other side. And then the only thing you have to do is hem your skirt on the bottom, and I like to keep my length, so I'm just going to make a very small rolled hem. You can also do a wider hem, whatever you like, and then your skirt is finished. The final project, a really nice and flowy skirt, very minimalistic, so very easy to style with all pieces that you have. Neutral colors, so always good. And well, you know what I think about the fabric. It sews very easily, but I'm not really a fan of the polyester, but it makes that it falls very nice and flowy. So I think it's a nice overall piece to have, and very simple and quick to make. So very good to have in your closet, and that you made it yourself is always a plus. So I'm very happy with the result. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down below in the comment section and I'll get back to you. And I hope to see you again next time for another sewing tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.